Hello, I'm Paula Bolton, co-founder of Lesbian Labour. Welcome to our Proud Lesbian series. During Pride Month, I'll be interviewing a wide range of lesbians to gather lesbian perspectives and to hear about lesbian lives in 2022. And my ninth interviewee today is Tess Joseph. Hello, Tess. Thank you for agreeing to share your stories with us.
Hi, Paula.
So I'd like to start with the lesbian bit. So how about you tell us something about your life as a lesbian?
I'm 61 now and I've been out since I was 22. So I came out in the early 80s while I was a student in Bristol at the Poly, and I was out to, kind of every day you come out again to new people, but I was out to the family that I lived with, my friends. I had my first fling in Bristol. That's when I came out. And then at that time, I was very involved in cultural stuff. I was a founder member of Practicing Poets, which was became a very well-known poetry group. And I was also part of the group that did the first International Feminist Book Week. And I remember getting the late Lillian Mohin down to talk to us, which I was very proud. Lillian at that time didn't know I was a lesbian, and I got an awful lot of flack from her. Because she was in London, I was in Bristol. What was she to know? It doesn't stop me admiring her and remembering her with great fondness for the work she did with Only Women Press, and we later became firm friends. But and I was also involved in Shifra. I was never formally a member of the collective, but it was a response to the spare rib dispute that so adversely impacted Linda Bellos, who also became a very firm friend during that period and has been one of my mentors ever since. I wrote for Shifra. I had something in every single thing, and I was part of setting up the Bristol Jewish Feminist Group with Mickey David and Claire Callender, and we, in response to the spare rib dispute, and Judy kind of used to come down regularly and support us. So my lesbian identity was very, very enmeshed with feminism and Jewish identity as well, in that Mickey, who I live with, I lodged with her family, her ex-husband and her two little children. Mickey is still a pivotal part of my life. And I see that as an intergenerational exchange because she's in her 70s and she was part of the Half the Sky group, which was the first feminist academic reader in the UK, alongside people like Ella Malos and Helen Taylor, and and Caroline New, such wonderful women who I knew through Mickey. And Helen also taught me while I was at the Poly and introduced me to Kate Chopin. And it was an absolutely marvelous time where I was involved very much in mixed stuff, doing a lot of drama, teaching kids drama with my friend Thurza, just being terribly active, being young and having a really good time. And it was very culturally rich. We used to go off to Greenham regularly and be part of the supply line. I mean, I never went for more than a night. I hate camping with a vengeance. I'm Princess. I do not like entrenching tools. I do not like benders. I do not like getting mucky. I just want it. But I was prepared to do it for the cause because it was right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, can I just stop you there? I'm just thinking, you mentioned Shifra and you mentioned spare rib. Now, there may be women that find their way to this, hopefully some younger women who won't know what either of those things are. So could you just describe what they are before picking up with what
Okay. Spare Rib was the feminist magazine that everybody used to get. It was like the equivalent, I think it's Mother Jones in America, which is still going. It was our version of, for younger women that might get that.
And it's just had its 50th birthday, hasn't it?
Well,
and its anniversary, Spare Rib.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
And it stopped publication quite a long time ago. And there was a dispute relating back to the first Lebanese conflict, whereas Linda Bellos, because she is Jewish, was not allowed to edit things because it was assumed that she was pro-Zionist. And as Jewish women from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of political beliefs, some pro-Zionist, some anti-Zionist, some don't give a monkeys, we thought that that was absolutely untenable, that she was being censored within the collective, or the assumption about her views in a way that nobody else in the collective was. And I still think that's untenable. You know, I think there's this whole thing about being Jewish in this country where people assume that you have got to give a public view on Israel, whatever that view is. And if you don't fit into it, whatever the grouping that you're in, whether it's a pro-Zionist grouping or an anti-Zionist grouping, I'm not prepared to beat myself over the head and tell people what I actually think, because I don't think it's any of people's goddamn business. And I will talk about it in private, but I will never talk about it publicly. And I think that the disputes are very complicated and not solvable, and that everybody's got rights in the situation. And when you come down very firmly and say, this is the right way, whatever this particular way is and whatever the ideology is, I think you're missing out a lot of the nuance and a lot of the work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of repairing relations between Israelis and Palestinians, things like Neve Shalom, which is a peace village founded by Israelis and Palestinians, or the dialogues in this country that I've been part of between Jews and Muslims, like I was part of in the wider political context. I was one of the people, there was a Aleph Aleph, which was founded by Sir Richard Stone and Maksud Ahmed. And I was very much part of that for several years, which was a institute, which is an institute in Cambridge, in my working life around these issues.
Right. So, and Shifra, just briefly.
Shifra, Jewish feminist magazine, plus that we raised money for, got a collective together for, as a response to Spare Rib, where Jewish women, Jewish feminists could talk about their ideas, talk about as Jewish women. And it was amazing.
Interesting that, you know, in the short few minutes that you've already spoken, there's been this endless litany of women and books and magazines, and this richness to what there was around at the time.
I mean, it was magical.
Yeah.
It was absolutely magical. And I feel so privileged growing up in that time, and lucking out on living with Mickey and her family and having this just absolute wonderful gift of endless support, because Mickey is my family and remains my family. I just did childcare for her daughter Charlotte, who I first met when she was not yet 3, lived with her and her brother Toby, and I did childcare for her 2 kids, and Charlotte's going to be 43 in September.
Right.
And you know that they are my family. Yeah. You know,
so did you because I mean it sounded you know, idyllic. You come out and you're immediately in the arms of a community, and you have mentors, and you mentioned the intergenerational thing. Did you come across any lesbophobia or homophobia in
Yeah,
the
in my
early years of you coming out?
Yeah, in my actual family.
Right.
I didn't come out to my actual family till much, much later. There's a funny story about how I came out to my father. I went to the first rail rate. When I moved to London in 1985, I became part of the Camden Lesbian Centre management group when we were getting the physical body for the centre together, and I was on it for about 2.5 years. I was elected onto it, and I did some of the work as a young woman around consultation for setting up the lesbian and gay unit in Camden, and that was partly because of my relationship at the time with Libby Lawson, who was part of the Shift for Collective, who was in Manchester and worked for the Manchester unit, and my friendship with Davina Cooper, who set up the unit, who was the youngest Labour councillor ever, who was instrumental in setting up the lesbian and gay unit in Haringey. So that was all pre-clause 28. And clause 28 was a direct response, I think, to some of the political initiatives and the advances we were making in local government, the inclusive advances around.
Just to clarify that point, so you're talking about the units. So there was the gay and lesbian unit, there were the women's unit
that set up in Camden.
That was the normal way of almost like caucuses in the different councils, weren't they, that were focusing on the specific
issue. But we had paid workers.
Yes.
You know, that we caucus, we work with support from council officials, and with actual councillors. The late Gloria Lazenby, Jenny Lazenby's mother, was incredibly supportive of us in Camden and really helped us get there.
Yeah.
And I think that that's got to be noted, how amazing she was.
So we were coming around to your coming out to your father.
Coming out to my father, I was in Brussels, and I went over with Kirsten Hearn and a bunch of other people like Simon Dennis, who was from the Camden unit. Kirsten at that time worked for the Haringey unit, and we met, I think we met in Geneva or before. No, actually we met in London, me and Kirsten, through mutual friends. So Kirsten and I were at this thing in Brussels, and it was the Grail Rainbow Group going for the Brussels stuff and the convergence of European rights with lesbian gay stuff, which eventually led many, many, many years later, but I'm so proud of this, to the employment regulations that, you know, for lesbian gay, that include lesbian gay people, you know, so that we weren't going to get sacked at work, and it was throughout Europe and the UK, and, you know, wonderful thing that Europe did for us. And I was there right at the start doing the pressure group stuff, and that, I think, is one of the biggest achievements of my life, being right at the very beginning, the kernel of that. And it was kind of like mega. And that weekend, Kirsten and I got together. I then went on, I got back on March the 6th, March the 7th, and it was the same night as Zeebrugge, the night that we sailed back. And I went immediately to my friend Reenie's, I was living in London, but I went hot-footed back from the ferry to Bristol as a surprise for my late friend Reenie Kelly's 40th birthday. And she's somebody I'd done drama with for a long time in poetry, and she was a wonderful woman. And so there was I, kind of going to see all my Bristol chums. And what happened? I got back to London, and I was living in this house of multiple occupation. There was a little phone box at the bottom of the stairs, you know, so that you could pay phone. And you've got to ring your dad. My friend Janie goes, you've got to ring your dad. So I get down to the bottom of the stairs. It's really cold. It's kind of, you nowhere to sit. And there was 20 questions by phone on the thing. And I wasn't prepared to have this discussion with him. But by the quality of my silence, he managed to find that one, it has something to do with feminism. And then he kind of managed to make that leap of logic to figure out that I was a lesbian. And I wasn't saying anything, but I was just kind of like,
what was it that had prompted him to ring you?
And deflection. And then there's him bursting into tears, being very emotional. I'm just happy that you're alive. And then
okay, so let me just get this clear, because it's very vivid in your head, but I'm just trying to clarify here. So because of the Zeebrugge ferry disaster, your dad was checking in to see that you were okay?
Yeah, that I was alive.
Yes, and for some reason,
I perished because I came back from Ostend the same night that Zeebrugge happened.
Yeah, and so for some reason, he then started doing the 20 questions.
Yeah.
There you go.
To figure out where I was. And
yeah.
I mean, looking back on it, it's hysterical. And then later that day, I wasn't out to my mum or to, well, I was out to my sister who worked out that I was lesbian. She's almost 8 years younger than me. But so later that day on the Monday night, I go off to the drill hall, because there used to be, every Monday, there used to be women's drinks night at the drill hall. Drill hall doesn't exist. It's where Raja is now, on Cheney Street.
Yeah. But
they used to have a women's night. They used to have a regular bar night for women on the Monday night, and it was very sociable. Used to love going. And I bumped into my friend Corinne Claxton, who's big in theatre. And she took one look at me and staggered and said, "But Tess, you're meant to be dead." It was hilarious. So this is our opening line whenever we see each other now, you know. Yeah. But they really thought that we'd all perish, all of us that came back, because nobody thought that kind of ferries come from different places. They all had Zeebrugge in their mind, and nobody thought about Ostend.
Yeah. Well, it could have wiped out a huge chunk of feminism in one fell swoop if you had have all been on that ferry. So it's good that you weren't, and you know, it's sad for those that did perish, really. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, we do feel like that, but it wasn't only feminism; it was gay men's politics as well, and you know, kind of stuff like that. So I guess that I was inclusive, and I think it's important to say that I was very inclusive in my politics at that time, and that was really important. Not that I spent a lot of time with gay men, but because of the politics of trying to get rights for people, that was really important.
And it was definitely lesbian and gay at that time anyway, in the early 80s, wasn't it?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, like, we used to hang out separately, but we used to definitely, we used to do the politics, and that became more apparent later with Section 28 and the start of the pandemic, which is also really important to me, the stuff that I was doing at that time.
Yeah.
Then
so I interrupted your flow. You were talking, you'd got as far as Greenham, nipping backwards and forwards there, doing the supply line. Then obviously we have Section 28 and the AIDS situation.
Yeah, that's a few years later, but I moved to London in 1985.
Right.
And that's when I became involved in the politics of the Camden Lesbian Centre Project. I still know the two women that were the paid workers, my friend Laura and my friend Shoned. And I am friends with a number of other women that were involved in the collective at the same time as me. Unfortunately, some of our number have died early, like Maria Casterchild, Emmy Doy has died, and Sharon Smith has died, and they were very, very instrumental. And at that time, when I moved to London, I worked for a market research company doing a shit job as a telephone researcher. I then went into coding for them and exit analysis. And I just used to go out. I used to go to the Fallen Angel on a Tuesday night, which was a pub that had a women's night. I used to go to Drill Hall on a Monday. I used to do all of that stuff. And I used to go around, and then on the Friday night, all of that stuff in, and I would go to stay with Mickey, the two kids, for Friday, and stay over Friday night dinner, and stay over at their house and do traditional Jewish.
I mean, it sounds, you know, idyllic, that you were busy changing the world, having fun, and you had support and friends around you. So
yeah, I did.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. I lost my job. I moved to a co-op, so I wasn't living in a horrible, dingy house, multiple occupation. I shared with 3 other women, and I'm still friends with some of the women that I was in the co-op with, particularly my friend Claudia Clare, who's a ceramicist who's having a lot of bother at the moment. And I know Mary Milne still from that time, and I know Avril not from that time. I sometimes see Melissa around Jewish stuff, but I've got a lot of friends from that period. I moved to a co-op in Balfour Street, and I eventually got a 1-bedroom flat through them, and lived there till 1992. So I was pretty secure.
Can I just ask about that? Because you know, I know some women in Nottingham that had a housing co-op there, a lesbian housing co-op, and it's something you rarely hear of now. It doesn't seem to be a way that women are approaching solving their living situation. Was there an era, do you think, when co-ops were a thing?
I think there was, and this wasn't a lesbian one. I lived in a lesbian house.
Yeah.
But a lot of co-ops were founded in the 70s and derelict places, and eventually got council grants and did short life, and then became longer life, and some of them became self-governing. And it was a wonderful way of getting somewhere secure to live that people don't really have. I don't think co-ops really exist in the same way anymore that they did. The opportunities for them within housing associations, in the way that when I lived in the co-op you could, but it was wonderful. A cheap rent, I think, was something like 60 quid a month, which even then was unheard of for a whole 1-bedroom flat. We had to be self-governing, and I made good friends. It was a wonderful place to live. Balfour Street, Elephant and Castle is very, you know, less than about 10 minutes walk to, at my pace, which is Nell's pace, to the station, Elephant Castle. Great, but all-night bus services, and it was very vibrant. And at that time, when I lost my job and I moved there, I managed to get a little bit of cash on the side work, working at Labour Party headquarters as a facilitator for 2 people that were visually impaired. So I was around Labour Party headquarters on Walworth Road. I was still a member of the Labour Party. Just about, I think, what did I resign over? Yeah, abandonment of unilateral to some, so I might not be a member, but I was very much a sympathiser. I didn't go over clause floor. It was because of the peace movement. I really believed that you know, anti-nuclear stuff was massively and remains massively important to me. My grandma, my mother's mother, Rosetta, was part of the pre-CND that marched Aldermaston, and she was friends in Brighton with Bertrand and Dora Russell, and that political legacy is massively important to me. You know, my grandma, she lived until I was in my 30s and was probably one of the most major influences on my life, except for Mickey.
So the multilateral stance of the Labour Party was a reason that you wouldn't have been able to be a member. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So can I just bring you full square around actually to your feelings about the Labour Party today?
I've had really mixed feelings about the Labour Party. I couldn't abide it when Jeremy Corbyn was in power, because whatever your feelings about Israel, things like supporting the mural in East London, which was definitely full of anti-Semitic tropes, was not on, and his treatment of Luciana Berger, who I actually knew from Aleph Aleph many years ago. She wouldn't remember me, but I remember her very clearly, was untenable. I thought it was impossible. I didn't think it was easy to be Jewish in the Labour Party, and it's not something that I could tolerate. I think that Keir Starmer's cleaned it up a bit, but I don't think it's, I think that I see, I know people in the Jewish Labour Party and Jewish Voices for Peace or whatever it is. I know people that are passionately committed Jews of the left that take pro-Palestinian stances and take a more traditional stance. And I'm not prepared to tie myself into knots, as I said earlier, over that stuff. But what I would say about my community, my Jewish community, which is the community of my heart, it's what I was born into, is that we have many and various views, and some of our disagreements are in public and some of our disagreements are in private. And I do not mind tearing people a strip in private, but I will not do it in public. And I'm this woman who has traditionally walked the middle ground. So I've got friends in different spheres that have different political views. I've always been able to balance the difference between my personal life and my personal views with knowing that there is a plurality and that we don't all have the same place that we start from or finish on, but we can enjoy each other's journey along the road, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So I'm going to bring you back to that. But so now we've got Keir, you think that the anti-Semitism has been cleaned up a bit. Are you a supporter now, a member? What's your...
No, I don't think I'm ever going to join a political party again. And I've got real difficulties about a lot of the stuff about, a woman can be anything.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Because I think it's a load of rubbish. I think that women's rights, I've always been a feminist, and I don't like the Equality Act being trashed. There are rights and protections for trans people. There are also rights and protections for women, and I'm not prepared to have our rights degraded.
Okay, well, that's a very clear statement. So on that subject, it's another of those subjects where there is a plurality of opinion. And the way you just described your ability to hold that middle ground within, the issues around Zionism and anti-Semitism and being Jewish yourself, do you find you're able to do that on this issue? Because somebody needs to. It's so factional, and there are so many pockets of very firm. I
did for the very longest time, but I don't think I can anymore.
Okay.
And I mean, I was always part of one of the things that I did. We haven't talked about my professional life at all, but I worked in diversity for a number of years within the criminal justice system. I did the first research in London, in the UK, I think within England and Wales, on setting up on lesbian LGBT issues for probation. And I was a person that got the first ever London Criminal Justice Board, which became a marker. And I did it with Yvette Williams, who then worked for the CPS and is now part of the Grenfell Justice for Grenfell, wonderful woman. We set up, and it was my programming, the first London Criminal Justice Board on LGBT issues. Linda Bellis was on it. I was doing it on behalf of the Diversity Directorate for London Probation. we had Neil Young, we had Suki Sandor from the NAS project. We tried to balance it in terms of women and men. We had trans people included. Peter Tatchell spoke, which was the first time he ever did anything willingly within the criminal justice system. And he talked about his experience as British police.
Right.
You know,
can I just ask what year this is?
And at that time, I counted Peter as an ally.
Right.
Oh,
what
God, it's
year?
in the 90s. I can't remember. It must have been about 96.
Okay, it's just interesting that
you will find it, London Criminal Justice Board. It's actually on the internet. You might be able to link it because they republished it at an anniversary. But I'm really proud of that thing. And we changed people in prisons' points of view. We just did a tons of outreach. I made links with Consortia, an LGBT charity, which was an umbrella charity for stuff going on, with groups tackling hate crime like Gallup, within the LGBT community, forums like the one that Mark Healy founded. I had a lot of links with the wider LGBT community, and I had absolutely no problem in that because
Tess, can I just say what I'm trying to work out here is you're the first interviewee that is saying LGBT 1996 because everybody else, the T hasn't appeared in the acronym until much later. So this is really interesting. Was it already inclusive of trans at that stage?
Yeah, at that time, we were forward thinking. The reason that I thought about that was in terms of the analysis of how hate crimes happen, because hate crime is one of the big areas of my life that I've done a lot of work on from when I was working in probation. And like one of the things that I was thinking about was same-sex domestic violence and how that was dealt with, and it wasn't. It's one of those dirty little things that we don't talk a lot, but it does happen. There were things that were going on in terms of coming out and being at risk of coming out were trans. There were also sorts of things in terms of potential risks to people. So I thought it was really important in terms of criminal justice stuff because of the vulnerabilities, how people put money for transition. A lot of people went to Thailand at time and they worked in the sex industry to get money to do things, and they were vulnerable as women are vulnerable that have been prostituted. They face different, but the vulnerabilities and the risks to self, the risk of harm was there. And so I thought it was important at that time because I'm an inclusive person. Like I was one of the people that were, kind of like, if I go back a bit, I was working in an HIV social work team before I qualified as a social worker at the height of the pandemic. I was involved in Stop the Clause and stuff like that. So it seemed like a natural thing, having done all these things before, to be inclusive. But there is much that has changed in my position from then. I thought it was fair, and I thought it was just, and I thought it was equitable at that time. Some of the things that really, really pissed me off later were when trans people got the right to marry before we got the right to civil partnership as lesbians and gay men. That really pissed me because I didn't see them going all out for me in the way that I had gone. That was one mark against the trans community.
Can you just explain that legislatively, because I don't think many people know about that.
Right, what happened was, we got the right to have a civil partnership into 2005, I think something like 2003, 2004, trans people, if they transitioned, right to marry.
Okay.
In the sex of their transition. You know, their and I didn't see anything, I did not see anything at that time, anybody kind of like saying, but let's support our lesbian and gay brothers and bi brothers and sisters that are in same-sex couples.
Okay.
I think that's, it's not something that a lot of people registered. It's something that I registered, and I was not particularly happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of quite difficult. I mean, like, my life has been absolutely chock-a-block full of political activity, and trying to give you a timeline and a narrative, when we keep flicking back and forward, it might be really confusing for people. But suffice to say that my life has been full of stuff, whether it's through the work that I have done that I've been paid for, or the stuff that I was involved in through trade union activity, or the stuff that just because of the people I know, you know, and stuff like that, that I know a lot of interesting people that do a lot of very interesting things. And while I might not be a pivotal player, I've seen a lot of the things going on.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So bringing it up to date then. So how is your, where are you now on the issues around the attempt to redefine what a woman is, and the idea from Stonewall that same sex is now no longer a thing and it should be same gender? You know, talk to me a bit about that. And if you can chuck in, because you're very good at answering it all in one beautiful lyrical swirl, the ever expanding acronym, because we're a lot further than LGBT now, aren't we?
Well, we're LGBT alphabet soup plus now, and I don't believe in any of that. Where am I now? I've had a lot of trans friends, and I was particularly close to one person, and it saddens me that the relationship is no longer there, but I don't want the relationship, if that makes sense. We haven't been friends for a long time, though we are still Facebook connected. And this person, when I went to something of Julie Bindle's, said, you shouldn't go to that, you've got to support me. And I've known Julie since 1986, and she's one of my very dearest friends. And it's not about politics, it's about the fact that she makes me laugh and drain. She's a fabulous cook, and we have a lot of running jokes that go back to a million years ago. I mean, I was involved in I have gone to various pickets for justice for women. We've hung out over the years, and her partner Harriet are two of the people who love us in the world. When I split up from my partner, when my partner left me in 2010, I was incoherent and inconsolable and suffered a major breakdown. Over the new year, Julie and Harriet and Julie's niece Jo whisked me away to their villa in Tuscany for a few days, and I could barely talk. I was just grief-stricken, a red blotchy mess of tears, and they just hugged me and looked after me and were there and were, kind of friendship like that is not stuff that you, how can you not value friendship like that? That is true friendship. And when my dad died, when my mum died, they were there, and I would be there for them in a heartbeat. They are wonderful, glorious women that are creative, inventive, huge fun, and people forget that feminism is always about, in the middle of all the crap, we went out and we had a bloody good time, because that's what you had to, and the shit was hitting land. And I think, you know, I'm a kind of a rose and Luxembourg. If I can't party, you know, I don't want to be Red Revolution. You know, that kind of big postcard from Luxembourg, one of the political heroines.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that stuff. But where I stand on trans stuff, I've always been feminist. I've always supported March for equal right. Where we're at now, I don't think is fine. When when my mum was still alive, I had Mary and I went to Brighton, so with my mum for a few days to check up on her, and Mary got me a ticket because she was going to the Party Fringe conference a few years ago. You will remember that. It was pre-COVID, wasn't it? Just pre-COVID. Yeah. And I went to that, and I met Lisa Marie Taylor for the first time. We met in the Women's Loos, and Lisa Marie is Filia, you know, quite wonderful behind Filia. And I'd been very isolated for quite a long time because of poverty and because of really severe depression. And it was just like the world opened up. But there was this huge picket of trans rights activists, and the police were supporting them outside. Now, I was horrified because I'd worked in diversity directorate at the Metropolitan Police Service as B, doing diversity around all 9 protected strands, and done some work around and I just thought that it was going in the wrong direction, that they weren't supporting us, that it wasn't in support of the Equalities Act, and that the training was shot in Brighton. It's completely fucked. Not to put too fine a point in it, I was absolutely horrified. I was horrified at the policing, and I remember Julie during it and saying, "This is horrific." She said, "I wasn't there." And I was, that was another chink. And I just thought we were not talking about anything that was antithetical to trans people. We were talking about and butter issues to do with women. And material sex is a reality. We are born in a body of chromosomes. We are either male or female, or male. And there are some sex conditions that they are on top of your natal sexes, you know what I mean, in terms of how sexual characteristics are done. But to say that our upbringing and conditioning doesn't matter, when I did my social work training, because I'm a qualified social worker, I did a lot of work on Bandura's social learning theory. And it's sociological stuff, but basically we pick up from around us, from our parents or our caregivers, where we go to school, the things that are in our environments, how we socialize. Now, the material reality of being a girl and our responses to periods, our responses to the reality of possibly being raped, domestic violence, these are things that unite women, whatever culture we are, whatever income bracket we are, wherever we are in the world. The reality of how women, you know, kind of stuff like FGM, you know, it's horrific. These are things that actually affect women. You know, abortions, corrective rape, all of that stuff, all of the horrible stuff. Now, for me, told that it's a feeling and it's about glamming up, or I feel I am this, somebody who's got significant problems, and I will respect them and their pronouns and stuff like that. But please do not tell me I do not have rights. One of the things that horrified me most last year, I was at the filiarance, and you know, there've been a number of stuff like that. But we went to, you know, when do the calling out of the names of deaf women,
Yes.
the femicide thing,
centres, yeah.
and there were trans rights activists. Now, there's a Trans Day of Remembrance where they also do I would know Maureen of going to that and disrupting it and saying that you've right to say these things and they should of me. And that really stinks. It hurts like crazy in a way that I can't even begin to see. It's absolutely unspeakable and wrong. And that denial of people, of who people are. Now, I also think that issues about trans kids young, you know, and our brains are plastic until we're 25. If people want to transition and they know the things as a full adult when their brains are fully formed, one, you know what risks you take. I find it difficult, but that is a choice that some people are making or feel that they're impelled to make for whatever underlying reason. But for young people, no. I think that it's barbaric. I think it's wrong. I think that I've got a parallel experience from when I was little. I'm very chunky, but I'm not as chunky as I have been. When I was a kid, I was chunky. We lived in Jamaica, and I came back to England for the year between, you know, the summer holidays between being 8 and 9 to see my parents in Brighton. My aunt at the time was, my late aunt Julie was chief pharmacist for St Mary's Hospital in London, in Paddington. And she had a friend who was a paediatrician. Paediatrician saw me, I was a chunky kid, I would have grown out of it. Said, oh, she's very fat, let's put on some pills. The pills were called Pondrax, their form of speed, and I was on that for 2 years, and it's irretrievably changed my brain. No, it's my parents' decision because they took care of a fat kid.
Okay.
That is hard, and for our children to put on, puberty blockers and things that irreversibly change them. It's just my brain chemistry that's been altered, and mood swings when I came off the pills, and all the things that nobody acknowledged because people stand at that time. To be on speed at the age that I was pre-puberty, no. And I would not wish anything as changing or as horrible on any child.
Yeah.
You know.
So that's a really very clear journey there with, you know, from the WPUK meeting and your witness as somebody with a history in diversity training that the policing was not fair, and that there you were as women discussing issues to do with women, and that there was nothing being said that was anti-trans, was the thing that people talk about being peaked. I think that sounds as if that was your entree moment. Yeah. And then the other thing in that story, I think you said you grew up in Jamaica.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
partly.
So you know, there you go. There's another bit to your amazingly diverse life that, you know, must have affected the way you see the world, Tess.
Yeah, my late mum always said that was going to go into race relations.
Yeah.
And so when I started to have her, because that was language they used for that. I grew up, my father worked for a great company until I was 13, called Careers International. And as a child, when I was 3, I lived in Jamaica. When I was 4 and 5, we lived in Cyprus at the time of the AO collapse, and I remember that vaguely. I remember being evacuated from Nicosia where I lived. And then when I was almost 8 to almost 10, we went back to Jamaica, and my dad worked in the Careers factory in Spanish Town that made harvested tobacco. And that was 68 to 70. And I'm a 1960-ian. So, and it was a time of great unrest Jamaica. I had a very lovely post-colonial life, but I knew that there were things that were wrong. We had a maid, and I thought that was wrong. You can't say anything when say anything when you're 8 years old, 9 years old, that you totally disagree. But it fundamentally, I saw the difference between the haves and the have-nots, the people that lived in the shacks and the gullies. I saw, and all the while we were having this wonderfully privileged lifestyle where my mum was having bridge parties in the afternoon, sipping gin and tonic with her friends. And we were going to some wonderful barbecues in various hotels on a Sunday, by the hotel pools, having lunch. And I got an idea of what was right and wrong, if that makes sense.
Yes,
because I saw what I had, and I saw what other people didn't have.
Yeah, the haves and the have-nots. Yeah. So yeah. Well, I mean, I'm aware that we've used our allotted hour, and that's an absolutely fascinating trip around the globe in 80 days. I mean, you know, whirlwind. I would like to. I mean,
it's not even a fraction.
No, absolutely. We need a kind of a whole book about Tess, really. And there could be an appendix with all these names. Yeah. So, but what I do want to come back to, just before we finish, is the issue of you as a poet, because you know, you talked early on about the number of books and magazines and, you know, writing that there was around, but do you have any comment at all about the availability or the dearth of books, culture, poetry, particularly for lesbians in the here and now? Where do we go for our cultural uplift?
I think
if you were a young woman coming out now, really, is what I'm thinking.
I would find it absolutely impossible. I find it almost impossible to write anyway, because I've got so many blogs. But Paula, you've been instrumental in me thinking about these things, with some of the things that you've done when I first met you. You are inspiration to me, because you actually think about women at Filia performing and doing things, and I haven't got an outlet, and I don't know where to go to publish. I don't write enough to do things. I don't feel motivated because I don't have a group that I'm meeting with regularly in person. I need, there's so much, but I think it's bloody difficult now. Because
how essential is it? I mean, what does poetry do to you as a woman and a lesbian?
I think it's hugely essential. I think it's hugely essential, because kind of some of the stuff like Avery Rich or Judy Gran, you know, the work of a common woman, or Irina Klepfitz, the stuff that I read when I was coming out. And to have those favourite poems, I think it's hugely important. And the anthems, the coming out poems, the coming out anthems and stuff like that. And I don't know where to go. I've spoken to my friends Lulu and Kelly about setting up, and I need to talk to you about, out of the context of this, about setting something specifically about culture, and maybe organising something at Horton at some point, and to organise a retreat where we start looking at setting up the networks that we were thinking about pre-COVID and things like that, and going and do that, and then that will enthuse me.
Well, that'd be great, because I mean, obviously these interviews will be, you know, we'll have them in perpetuity. So we're building. For me, this is as I said, collecting lesbian perspectives, but hearing about lesbian life. So we'll at least have a bank of something that could feed future creative projects. But I do think that it's time that we start, you know, just collecting together an anthology of lesbian poetry, because to be isolated, to have no one that understands you, and to find yourself represented in a few lines, it's intense, it's concentrated, and it's something you can carry around in your head. Far, I think, in a way, much more powerfully than an image on a screen that is absolutely preset and you don't match it. You might empathize with the character, but as somebody said about, I'm loving watching Gentleman Jack, but she's a Tory. You know, there's yeah. So I shall definitely touch.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And the reason I wanted to do this, I've been involved in Jewish oral history, LGBT oral history, and I was cut from that because I was seen as anti-trans, and I was cancelled before I peaked. So yes, this is really important.
You can't win. A life spent advancing diversity, and you're cancelled. Anyway, you're not cancelled because you're part of this as my 9th proud lesbian. So thank you very much, Tess.
Key baller. Bye.
Bye.